All right. So today I want to talk a little bit more about smart mapping in the ArcGIS API for JavaScript and how you can use the smart mapping tools in your own applications to make some really cool maps. Okay, so first off, let's take a look at the documentation in the API. If you take a look at the documentation, you'll see a folder here called Esri Smart Mapping. Let me make this a little bigger here. Oops, too big, too big, too big. Okay, here we go. So we got Esri Smart Mapping, and in here we have a folder for heuristics. We have the scale range and size range. We have labels, which is pretty much used for clusters right now. Pop-up, which I've talked about before to be able to get pop-up templates. Raster renderers, raster support, there's utils there. Other renderers, so things like dot density, heat map, predominance, relationship, and more. Statistics, which is kind of cool. You can get a histogram here and use this histogram with the histogram slider in the API. Support stuff, symbology, and this is if you want to get like the color schemes for stuff. So you get like the heat map in here, and you can get the different schemes used in a particular heat map. This is kind of an interesting tool here. Today I want to talk a little bit about though heuristics, getting the scale range, getting pop-up templates, and then getting a renderer, right? So let's take a look at this layer I have here. So this is a layer of U.S. counties landscape. And if I run this here, basically going to be this layer here, which is fine. You know, this is as it's published. You can see I'm using the URL directly over here. So it was published with a nice color ramp and everything. It looks cool. And it's going to pretty much give me, information very pertinent to what I want. But, it's got no pop-up predefined. And if I went and found the item online, then yes, it's available. But if you happen to come across a layer like this and you want to, fancy it up a bit, you want a nice pop-up, you want some a renderer to reflect some data that you want to look at, and you also want to control when people can see it, right? You want to make a min-max scale. So let's look at how you can do that. You see right now it doesn't have a min-max scale defined. Okay, so let's go heuristics and look at scale range, for example. Right, so scale range has a method called scale range, and it's going to take a layer, the view, and it's going to return a scale range result, which is just going to have the min scale and max scale. So let's try that first. So I come down here. So just above where I add the layer, let's start doing some smart mapping. Right, so in here, it's going to have, let's say, scale range. And then we want to do some the renderer. And then we want to do the pop-up. All right, so let's start with scale range first. So here what we're going to do is it's a promise. So I'm pretty much just going to say, I'm going to do some destructuring here. And we're going to wait for this to happen. And I've already got these methods imported. Whoops. We come up here. You see I've already got the scale range, get templates, and create renderer imported from the smart mapping tools. So if I say scale range and then pass it the properties it's expecting, so I need to have a layer. It's going to be my feature layer and the view. I'm going to leave the sample size as default because it's not really not too concerned with that at the moment. So I'm going to get back a min scale. Oops. There we go. And a max scale. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say that my feature layer min scale is equal to min scale. And the feature layer max scale is going to be equal to the max scale. All right, perfect. So if I come back over here, I can no longer see the layer at this level. But if I zoom in a little bit more, there we go. So this is according to smart mapping tools, this is a pretty good min-max scale for me to use. And it's probably going to be available for me to see all the way zoomed in. And it turns off when I'm down below another level. Because it doesn't make sense. If you think about it, it doesn't really make sense for me to look at it at this level. You know, I'm probably, if I'm zoomed in that far, I'm probably interested in looking at the base map at that point, right? So it makes some decisions there based on the data. I'm guessing how big some of these samples, some of the geometries maybe. I don't really know what it does. I'm just, you know, guessing. But it does some smart stuff, thus smart mapping. Awesome. Okay, so what's next? Next, we want to get a renderer. So if I come under renderers here, maybe I'm interested in looking at, like, I don't know, predominance is kind of a neat one. That might be a bit too much. Relationship. Okay, so maybe I'm interested in looking at the relationship between two fields and rendering that out. So you can read all the information here on the relationship renderer, which is also known as a bivariate choropleth, right? So everyone's done choropleth maps before. And you can even do them in 3D, which is kind of cool. So again, I highly suggest you look at the data viz guide, the visualization overview that it's in part of the SDK, if you want a bit more details on this stuff. But basically, we're going to use this create renderer method, and the create renderer is going to take a layer, a view, and then we have to define some fields that we want to do the relationship between. So field 1 and field 2, right? So, all right, let's take a look at this. Okay, so const is going to be equal to await, create renderer, and I said needs to take some parameters here. So I need to send it the layer, of course. So that's my feature layer, the view, and I need a couple of fields. So we have field 1, field 1, and field 2. Okay, so let's take a look at the data here. Now, maybe, I mean, it has an awful lot of fields here, and I can kind of just pick any two fields really and try to find a relationship. But, you know, if I look at the age of 45 to 54, the relationship to families, I mean, I don't really know if that's going to tell me too much. Maybe if I look at like housing units versus its relationship to vacant units, or housing units to family, maybe. I don't know what the family number is going to be. Families, it's going to be an integer, so a number. So I'm guessing number of families in a household. Well, let's go. No, let's go with vacant and housing units. So let's try that. So the field is going to be HSE units. And then for the second field, it'll be vacant. Okay. Now this is going to return me back a renderer. Now once I've got that render, just like I did with the min scale, max scale, I can just say that feature layer dot render is going to be equal to, well, if I can spell, render. All right, let's take a look at this now. Remember, if I gotta zoom in a bit, because I have a min scale, max scale now. That work? What happened? Any errors? Error in promise. Unknown field HN. Oh, I misspelled it. Units. There we go. Okay, now if I zoom in, there we go. Yeah, it's even reflected back in my legend for me here. So in LA County, well, we have a high relationship between number of vacant units and housing units. But in, no, down over here, well, there's all the other places. Well, look at all these places here. We've got a low relationship between housing units and vacant units. So I don't know how much of a story that tells, but I think it is really interesting here looking across, like, you know, the central US here. There's not much of a relationship, and probably just due to population numbers, right? More populated places are going to have that stronger relationship than the less populated places. So that's interesting, right? I mean, that kind of shows me something. Awesome. But I don't have a pop-up. I want a pop-up, right? Come on, my map isn't complete until I have a pop-up. So okay, that's next on our list. So we've done this before in my videos. I'm basically going to say that const is going to be equal to await get templates. And this is going to take a, if I come over here again, let's just double check pop up get templates method. Takes my layer. Now I can pass it another renderer different from what's on the layer, and I believe that'll give me a second pop-up template to use if I want to, if I decide to change the render, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to stick with the layer I already have. And this is going to return back to me a template, and it's going to have a primary template. So I'm interested in the primary template. Okay, awesome. Now once I have that, I can just say feature layer dot pop-up template. It's going to be equal to primary template value. However, the template I get back isn't going to have a pop-up template by default. Won't have a very descriptive title, so I'm just going to use the title that comes back with the template and not the pop-up template. Get what I'm saying? I hope so. So we're going to say feature layer dot pop-up template dot title is going to be equal to the primary template dot title. You don't have to do this, but I just found that it's a little bit more descriptive. And it's basically just going to be the relationship between that is the renderer is using, right? So if you come over here, well, I'm sorry, it's going to be the title of the renderer I'm using. So I'm using a relationship renderer, so it's going to give me title relationship. So here we've got housing units, almost 700,000 to 88,000 vacant units. And then somewhere over here where it's not a high relationship, we have 3,000 or 3,500 housing units and 489 are vacant there, right? So that's kind of how that, it's a nice pop-up template. It gives me a bit more info. But what's happening here, it's not just a plain table. So that's pretty cool. All right, so this is just an example of how you can use the smart mapping tools that are part of the ArcGIS API for JavaScript to build some pretty cool apps in your web maps, right? So you can add some pretty cool functionality. You get a really nice renderer. You can get some min-max scale, so you don't show all the data at once, only when it's really pertinent or makes sense to show it, as well as get a pop-up template that's going to give you a pretty good summary of the data you're looking at. So go ahead, try those out, play with them. There's a lot more things you can do. Like I said, I just went with the relationship renderer, but maybe you can do predominance. You can do a heat map or dot density. Just depends on what it is you're looking to do. All right, so don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Leave me any questions you might have. I can cover them in future videos. Thanks a lot.